2 weeks ago, I spent a beautiful weekend in the mountains of the glorious Wasatch Canyon, which is about 45 minutes outside of Salt Lake City. I was there with my two oldest friends from growing up. We share a great deal of history, to be sure. Two of us have been friends since we were 10. We also share a common thread in that each one of us has lost someone important to us in a seemingly unfair way. I've spoken before about how my father died when I was just 17. He was 49, younger than I am right now. Julie's husband died at the age of 52, suddenly, without warning. Lisa's brother died of a heroin overdose 13 years ago at the age of 34. We talk about these losses a lot. We talk about meaning, hope, forgiveness, and God. We talk about the moments when we felt we have been in the presence of the spirits of our dad, our husband, our brother. We talk about the afterlife and past lives. We suppose, we dream, we struggle. It's fair to say we have become closer and more open to our understanding of the sacred because of our losses. Now, over the years, I've come to believe that all theological writing, all our prayers, midrash, Talmud, our law codes and folklore, even the Bible, even the Torah itself, are in the final analysis just creative attempts to put into words a personal encounter with the sacred. Some words, to be sure, get it better than others. One of the authors of the Bible perceived the image of God within every human being. Another author declared that God had a problem with boiling a kid in its mother's milk. One called God endlessly patient, loving, and true. Another called God a man of war. One had God describe to Abraham a promised land with a multitude of descendants. Another wrote of a God who told Abraham to sacrifice his son. Oh well. In the end, all theology is autobiography. Losing my dad, and for Julie and Lisa losing their husband and brother respectively, did not render any of us professed atheists. But I have, in the past couple of decades, made my peace with the fact that the God who filled my childhood imagination with fantasies of a world governed by a just and compassionate ruler who cared intimately about me and everyone else would now have to give way to a God no less transcendent but considerably less concerned with my feelings. On this holy day, and over the course of the next 10 days, we will be asked to think about the haphazardness of life and about where God fits in or does not fit into the picture. And because all theology is autobiography, while this is a conversation about God, it's even more about you and me and about how we fit into the big picture. On Rosh Hashanah, it is written, on Yom Kippur, it is sealed. How many shall pass on? How many shall come to be? Who shall live and who shall die? Who shall reach ripe age and who shall not? Who by fire and who by water? We don't know who wrote this prayer or what experiences may have prompted it. Legends ascribe it variously to Rabbi Ephraim of Bonn, who chronicled the massacre of the Jews of the city of York, England in 1190, or to the 11th century figure, Rabbi Amnon, who was given a choice by the Archbishop of Mainz: convert to Catholicism or have your limbs amputated. After 3 days, the legend goes, Rabbi Amnon was sent home with his severed extremities on a knight's shield. The Unatana Tokef prayer is, in all likelihood, many centuries older, and God only knows what originally moved the author to imagine, as Rabbi Flip said earlier, this book of life, and an all-knowing God who writes and seals and records and recounts every human deed. What we do know is that the prayer gained popularity in the Middle Ages following the massacres of the Jewish communities during the Crusades, the wholesale expulsion of Jews from medieval European communities, and the various atrocities visited upon our people during that period. It makes sense that a prayer acknowledging that death can, at a moment's notice, just drop in, would become popular in such precarious times. Who by fire and who by water? Who by sword and who by beast? Who by famine and who by thirst? Who by his own hand and who by another's? Who by cancer, who by heart attack? Who by stumbling down and who by slipping away? Who by gunfire, who by airplane crash? We demand a certain reasonableness from life and death. From earliest childhood, we learn what's fair and what's not, what should and what should not happen. And we project unto God those self-same attributes of fairness, of should and shouldn't. We imagine a God who is judge and arbiter, counsel and witness, the ultimate standard bearer of what's fair and right. And we do so, I think, in utter defiance of how the universe actually works. That is to say, all of our life's experiences teach and reteach us that God's world is not calibrated to human notions of fairness. We wish for fairness, and even sometimes comfort ourselves with a belief in a God who is keeping it all in order. But look at things. That can't be so. Day in and day out, year in and year out, over a lifetime, we encounter a randomness Hamlet would have called the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. What I say here is no heresy. The book of Deuteronomy proposes a simple formula for life and death, blessing and curse. Live by God's law, God will reward you. Disobey and face God's punishment. The righteous will prosper, the wicked be damned, and all the rest is commentary. Doesn't this sound like what, as children, we learned from grown-ups? A little while later, along came a biblical author with a very different perspective, a different literary agenda, a different autobiography, and a different theology. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, the story begins. That man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, and so many servants that this man became the wealthiest and most powerful in the East. And every day Job praises God with sacrifices and offerings, and above all, by keeping far from sin and wrongdoing. And on a whim, God accepts a dare from an angel named Hasatan, the adversary, or the Satan, as he's better known, and strips Job of everything. His wealth vanishes, his herds perish, his children are murdered, his robust health gives way to chronic sickness and pain. He suffers without warrant or recompense, and his friends insist, you must have done something wrong to invite this torment. For 37 chapters, Job maintains his innocence and demands that God answer him. The book of Job gives a pretty black eye to the theology of Deuteronomy, arguing that blessing and joy, life and health do not necessarily correlate to a person's righteousness, that death and suffering do not necessarily correspond to moral waywardness, that God's motives are not so easily fathomed. What did I ever do to deserve this, Job demands?
And finally, God answers, materializing out of the whirlwind. The answer is not comforting. Who is this who speaks without knowledge, God says? Stand up and carry yourself like a man. I'll do the asking now, and you tell me the answers. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundations? Speak if you have understanding. Have you ever commanded the day to break or assigned the dawn its place? Have you penetrated to the sources of the sea or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been disclosed to you? Have you seen the gates of deepest darkness? Have you surveyed the expanses of the earth? If you know these, tell me. So in the end, in case you haven't read it, God restores Job's fortunes and resurrects his family. But the message is permanently shattering. You want to know why good people suffer and die? Well, what do you know of how God's world actually works? Job is a brutal book. Part of it seems designed to disturb. A God who bargains with Satan? Who blithely rips apart an innocent man's life? Really? Much has been made of the cruel and capricious God of the book of Job. But what if the book's theology is just a window into an autobiography? One human being's reckoning with the universal human condition. Because Job speaks true in reminding us that we human beings are so small and our universe is so vast. And Job speaks true in its recognition of how unreasonably we suffer. And Job speaks true in realizing that life has no upper limit to the pain it can inflict. No logic can explain the seemingly relentless law of life that would exact the price of sorrow for each of its joys, the penalty of loss for each of its gifts. Why does life hurt so much? Why would a human being die before his time? How to account for the tsunami and the earthquake, leukemia and lymphoma, suicide and genocide, the air crash and the car crash? How to reconcile these with the mountain and the sunset, the ocean and the wind, the mystery of consciousness and feeling, the love of family, the joy of friendship, and the glory of nature? Well, where were you when the foundations of the earth were established? In the end, some questions echo back only a silence as deep and ominous as the grave. And yet, it is human, maybe the most human thing of all, to ask why anyway. Okay. How many of you have seen the film A Serious Man by the Coen brothers? Show of hands. All right, Josh is excited. Okay. The movie is basically a modern retelling of the story of Job. Larry Gopnik is a mild-mannered physics professor, that is to say, someone whose job it is to figure out how the world works, who has thrust upon him all manner of suffering. His wife leaves him for another man. A disgruntled student blackmails him over a bad grade. His bar mitzvah-aged son is defiantly smoking marijuana. And why is his doctor asking for him to come in right away after a routine checkup? Larry reacts, as most of us would, utterly bewildered that his life is falling apart so absurdly. Over the course of the movie, he seeks advice from a rabbi, actually 3 rabbis, one of whom says, "Hashem doesn't owe us the answer, Larry. Hashem doesn't owe us anything. The obligation runs the other way." And so Larry cries, "But why does he make us feel the questions if he won't give us the answers?" And if ever there was a more heartbreaking and eloquent description of the human condition, that might be it. Why does he make us feel the questions if he won't give us the answers? The rabbi shrugs and says, "He hasn't given me the answer to that." How to give voice to the terrible human yearning the way we feel the questions that have no answer. Because in the end, there really is no good answer to the great and terrible why of human suffering. No adequate response to why bad things happen to good people, except to go on living as vigorously and beautifully as we can. So it might be that we're asking the wrong question. We ask why the world is the way it is when we should ask, why are we the way we are? And how can we be the most realized versions of ourselves that we can be? Instead of asking why of life, we might ask, okay, now what do I do? Who must I become? Of course, we can give up on life, and sometimes people do. Sometimes the weight and the agony of feeling overtakes the ability to live with hope and joy. And of course, we could conclude that it's all random, that life has no meaning, that there's no God. But the only problem is that to live by the nihilist creed also hinders our access to life's immense potential for beauty and joy, for purposeful action, and for holiness. The real answer is not that life is meaningless, nor that life is meaningful. It's that life's meaning is not inherent. We assign meaning to it. Life is not good or bad or right or wrong. There's no divine blueprint for each human life, no plan for what might befall us on any given day. We make the meaning of our life. We paint the canvas of our days with whatever brushes and colors we've been given, with whatever imagination and wisdom we can summon, with whatever help we can get for as long as we can do it. Life isn't meaningless or meaningful. We decide what meaning we give it. Life's meaning is not inherent. We assign meaning to it. And now that we know that, we might find it a little harder to get out of bed in the morning. Or we can swallow the pill of uncertainty, as bitter as it is, and get on with our day, trying to fill it with as much earnest love, eager learning, honest labor, and healing meets vote as we possibly can, because when all is said and done, that is really our only choice. The celebrated sages Hillel and Shammai had an argument. Given the seemingly endless supply of human suffering, they asked, would it just have been better for humankind never to have been created at all? And in the end, Shammai's opinion prevails, which is very uncharacteristic because Hillel wins almost every single debate. And Shammai says, all in all, it would have been better for humankind never to have been created. But better, the Hebrew word for better here is noach, and noach literally means easier or more comfortable. So given the choice between existence and non-existence, back to Hamlet's to be or not to be, it's obviously more comfortable, the more comfortable option, the easier way. But in fact, Hillel gets the final word. Now that we have been created, let's examine our deeds. So here we are. We're at the beginning of this 10-day journey of self-reflection and examination. And whatever our autobiography, whatever our theology, whatever doubt or certitude, whatever belief or unbelief we bring to the table, it belongs here in the sanctuary on this New Year's Day. Because what unites us is Judaism's insistence that our lives matter, and that because our lives matter, our deeds matter. So now that we're here, we might as well examine them. The randomness of life may just as well senselessly rip a loved one away from us as it would offer us success and happiness. The only way to live with that terrifying chaos is to be as compassionate as we can, no matter what happens. I want to share one more story as I close. There was a stand-up comedian, Patton Oswalt, who until 2016 was married to the author Michelle McNamara. And Michelle wrote about real-life crimes, serial killers, that sort of thing. The worst day of his wife, Oswalt tells his audience, is not the day he woke up to find that his wife had died in her sleep at the age of 46. It was the day after, when he had to explain her death to their 7-year-old daughter. I had to look at this little girl that was everything to me and take everything from her, he said. Over the next couple of years, as he rewrote the script of his life around this awful turn, he ruminated on what it all means. And in his show, he explains that he and his wife used to have a debate. He would say, "I don't believe in an intelligent creator, but I think there might be a latticework of logic and meaning to the universe that maybe we're just too small to see." Having written at length about horrific real-life crimes, the cliche his wife absolutely hated the most was, "Everything happens for a reason." So she responded, "It's chaos. Be kind. That's all you can do. It's chaos. Be kind." From time to time, they'd go back and forth in this heated philosophical debate. Oswalt says, and then she won the argument in the worst way possible. So maybe she was right. Maybe it's all chaos. Maybe Shammai was right. It would have been easier never to have been created in the first place. Maybe the God of Job was right. What do you know of the way my world works? The universe is not calibrated to human notions of fairness, this is true. And fairness comes not from out there, but from inside us. It's our moral imperative to bring human reason, human fairness, human compassion into an unreasonable, unfair, often merciless world. Kindness is the ultimate antidote to the chaos of the universe. That's the most important thing we could affirm on this first morning of a new year. And even if I'm wrong, what could it hurt? Good Yontif.